Vocal Ped class. This is Laura Baumgartner here, reporting for duty. I read 2 books. One is One Voice, Integrating Singing and Theater Voice Techniques by Joan Melton with Kenneth Tom, as well as Complete Preparation, A Guide to Auditioning for Opera by Joan Dorneman with Maria Chikacha. Sure. I'm going to talk about One Voice first. The book as a whole was very interesting. It was mainly geared around yoga techniques and how you should start every day with some sort of movement, and as well as not just yoga, but just moving in general, and how if you are aligned correctly and if your body is engaged correctly, you can sing, or whether that's singing or acting or doing musical theater, it all goes into one. You being a well-rounded person, physically, mentally, everything, you can become a better performer. So the first section is about alignment and how before you sing or act or do anything on the stage, how you should become aligned, per se. And her technique, Joan Melton, she took from the Alexander technique as well as Pilates, putting both of those together. And what she says, how you would feel like you were aligned, is if a plumbing line could go smoothly from your ear all the way to your toes, and that nothing, like if you dropped something through this plumbing line, it would go all the way down and nothing would interfere with this plumbing line. And in order to get aligned, she has a few exercises that she demonstrates in the book, but the one that I felt most useful for me was called the roll down. And what that is you release your jaw, let it hang, and you can either say like an ah or an like just a neutral vowel as you roll down, essentially. So you put your hands in the air in like a V position per se, I guess, and you just start at the top of your neck in your head and just start going down, and you do a slow roll down, all like feeling all of the vertebrae just starting to go down, and you go all the way down to the floor and you touch the floor. And as you do that, you start with a low hum or a low and start going higher as you go down. So almost like a glissando going from, or like a vocal something, not glissando, but another word for that. And just go from a lower pitch all the way up to a higher pitch as you go from your high V all the way to the floor. And then you do the exact thing opposite. And when you come up, you start from a higher pitch and you go up to a lower pitch. And as you come up, you should feel aligned and ready to do a performance, coaching, anything. And then and she talks about breathing a whole bunch, but the next actual section is called breathing in general. And she talks about how if you're not breathing correctly and you're not relaxed, then the sound you produce is going to sound a lot different than what we want it to sound like. So she talks about how you can take breathing and come from all different sorts of directions, but what she talks about is you need to have a lot of support, and that develops from a wide, strong, flexible place, and that will also let you have an expanded pitch range. If your breathing is wide, big, strong, you're very grounded. And she talks about the dying roach will get you into a good breathing placement, which is almost like, it looks like a dying roach is why she calls it that, but you're laying on your back and you put your feet into a 90-degree angle. So almost like they're just in a big V position, but then you bend your knees almost towards your chest. And then you put your arms in a V as well. And then you flip your hands like this, and you kind of bend your elbows towards your side. And as you're breathing, you can do a hum or any type of neutral vowel sound, because if you are having trouble with your breathing and making this sound, then you know that you're not, first off, you're not aligned, and second, that it's harder to breathe when you're in this position, because you should be able to run around the stage, do anything with if you're aligned and if your breathing is correct. And then she goes into a chapter about vocal anatomy, which pretty much reiterated everything that we have in our vocal ped book. So I'm not going to talk about that right now. But also she has some exercises about articulation and how you should start when you're trying to speak and sing words. Start with your vowels first. And then once you get through your vowels, then you can add consonants and stuff like that, and then try and put it all together. And then she has solutions for problems with consistency in the voice. And she has 3 solutions. One is your communication between your movement and voice goes together. Also, individual adaptation of the voice related breathing patterns to some movement work. So your breathing, your voice, your movement, it all coincides. And then also the use of movement-based exercises in voice class. So while you're in your voice lessons, when you're in your vocal coachings, or when you're in the practice room, put these movement exercises in, because if you're not being able to move and being able to freely move throughout your body, you're not completely relaxed and you're not using all of your voice. So that's pretty much all that I'm going to talk about with her book. She has some performance details, your auditions for musical theater, and how you need your ballad, your upbeat, your character piece, something that just showcases you and what you do well. But other than that, I think that's all I'm going to talk about for her book. And then we move on to The Complete Preparation, A Guide to Auditioning for Opera. And she talks about, first off, your mental health, and how if you're mentally unstable, you're not going to be able to make a good performance career. Because there are people that are going to criticize you, there are people who are going to reject you, and there are people that don't really know your instrument and are going to say things that you might take as a fact, and really it's an opinion, and it doesn't actually reflect your voice. So she talks about ways to pretty much deal with all of these hardships that you're going to face. She's not sugarcoating it, and she's saying, you're going to be rejected, you're going to feel these things, and you just need to be able to deal with them healthily. So she also, in her second chapter, talks about how your externals are important. We all would love to think that you can look any sort of way and it's all just based on your voice. And sometimes it is. She gives the example of Joan Sutherland, because her voice was so exceptional that nobody cared what she looked like. She wasn't the most beautiful human being on the planet. And you don't have to be the most beautiful human being on the planet. But she gives the example of there are going to be blind people in the audience, and there might be deaf people in the audience. So if you have your blind person, they're going to hear your vocal beauty. So your vocal beauty needs to come out. But as well as the deaf people, they want to see your performance and see a beautiful performance. And you need to be able to look and sound like your part that you are trying to portray to the audience. And then she goes into repertoire and how a lot of young singers pick these big arias that they are just not ready for. And we all have probably heard that before. You're just not ready for this yet. You can do this, but just not yet. And she talks about how you should make a list of arias that you're doing right now, arias that you think that you'll be doing in 5 years, 15 years, 25 years, 30 years, and just see where you're going. Because she says a lot of young singers are like, in general, some type of lyric singer. And people get in trouble when they bring these big arias into auditions. And people are already, whoever is looking at you and judging you on what you're doing is already having weird thoughts about you and casting you because you're picking something that you're not ready for, because they see that you're 20 years old and you're trying to sing Aida. And so before you even sing anything, and maybe you sound fantastic doing Aida, but before you even open your mouth, they're judging you for doing something that technically a 20-year-old might not be ready for. So then she goes into the text and the music. Text is very important, and she thinks that you should really learn as many languages as possible, because if most of your audience is not going to know the language that you're singing in. And so if you don't have a good grasp on the text, as if you don't know what your counterpart and the other parts in the show are saying, they're going to be able to tell, as well as they're not going to get what you want them to get in a performance. And she's talking about auditions mainly, so she's saying, you need to picture those people there, as well as you need to take your family member, your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, and practice on them so that you can see how it feels to have somebody there to be your Alfredo or to be your Rodolfo or whatever, just so that you can understand what you're trying to portray to this person. Because a lot of times singers think that they're portraying what their piece is saying, but they're actually not. And also you need to record yourself, which I hate doing, and watching myself after. No, I just hate doing it. But she said that you need to do it, which I agree, even though it's a little bit I still agree that it needs to happen. And then she talks about the music and how your musicality needs to be good. You need to really hone in on everything that your voice teacher talks to you about, and ask for feedback, because she even this is a quote from the book. It says, you can get approval from your mama for free. And when you go and sing for all of your colleagues or all of your friends, or like in our free-for-alls, a lot of people are just going to tell you did a great job. And when you need to be going to your voice lessons and your vocal coachings and things, and getting a real opinion of what you did, because you need to keep getting better, and you need to put your best audition pieces forward so that you can showcase yourself the best. And then her next step is intonation and projection during your auditions. Because if your intonation isn't great, they're not going to want to hire you. As well as you need to be able to project, because you might be singing in big halls if they hire you, and they need to be able to hear you. And then also, one of her last steps is figure out how to move in your audition, and how a lot of people aren't really sure whether they should move a lot, whether they should stay in place. It also depends on the aria that you're singing, but that's also why you need to practice with a person, or even if they're not on stage with you, have them in the audience where the people who will be watching you will be, so that they can tell you, okay, well, maybe you should move a little more in this spot. Okay, in this spot it's awkward because you're moving too much. And also figure out if you don't need to move at all, because you want your audition to be the best that it can be. And then she talks a little bit about the college setting and how people sometimes think that college settings are very realistic to what you're going to experience in life, and sometimes they are. But she says that a lot of people develop their egos in college, whether that is they get way too overconfident or whether they have very, very low self esteem. And that people just don't realize that that's not really how it is. And their experiences in college are not what it really is like. And one of the first paragraphs she talks about are teacher relationships, like the relationships between the teachers, and how a lot of times students develop this low self-esteem or develop overconfidence because the teachers want the best studios. And since they want the best studios, they're going to be fighting over people. Or they don't think that their teacher is really showing them any kind of support, and you can see them picking favorites, and you can see them showing more support to other students, and so they think that they're not talented. And she says, you should stick it out if you're in a good environment. If it's a horrible environment, of course, switch universities. But that's not really how it is in the real world. And that you just have to get over that and build up your self-confidence, or don't get too overconfident, because that shows when you go out to audition for people in the real world. And that school is for progress. And so and you shouldn't go to a school just because you heard they have the best opera program in the entire United States, or for their name, because it's all about your progression and your teacher. And when you get out into the real world is when you're going to be auditioning for big name things, like big opera companies. But for school, it doesn't matter. And if you feel like you're growing as a singer, then you need to stay put. So that's all that I have for these two books. They were very interesting. Both they were trying to achieve the same goal, just talking about different things. One was focused more on your movement and your breathing, and one was more focused on the actual getting ready for your audition. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it, and ta-ta for now.